My family ignored my success to celebrate my sisters. So, I grabbed the mic and exposed it all. And oh, more being invisible. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we dive into a story where the main character faces a situation that many of us can relate to. Have you ever felt invisible, overlooked, or like your achievements were never enough? In this story, you'll see how the protagonist struggles with being pushed aside in her own family, and how she eventually finds the strength to stand up for herself. Stay with me till the end to see how she overcomes it all. And if you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support gives me the motivation to keep sharing more powerful stories with you. Let's get started. There I was, Samantha Harlow, a girl from the suburbs of Seattle, living in a house that looked like it came straight out of a home decor magazine. White picket fences, a neatly manicured lawn, and windows that reflected the soft hues of sunset every evening. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect family. Dad, an overworked corporate lawyer. Mom, an ever-so-present motivational speaker for self-help seminars. And my younger sister, Emily, who could do no wrong. But inside, the picture was a lot different. Mom had an obsession with success that was hard to miss. When I was born, she promised herself that I would be exceptional, a child prodigy in every sense of the word. She had books on every possible method of early childhood development, books about brain mapping, genius programming, and psychological advancements in toddlers. I was her experiment, and that was fine. But what wasn't fine was the constant pressure to be the best. When I was only 3, I still couldn't recite the alphabet perfectly, and Mom was livid. "Why can't you keep up?" she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to anyone else. Emily could already read at this age. Maybe she'll have what it takes to make us proud. I remember the way Dad just nodded, staring at me like I was some math problem with no solution. There was no room for me to be me, only space for what I was expected to become. By the time Emily was born, everything changed. I could feel it immediately, the shift in the atmosphere, the unspoken weight that settled over the house like an invisible cloud. The toys that had once cluttered our playroom, the simple blocks and dolls I had loved, were replaced with gadgets and tools designed to stimulate, enhance, and track development. There were musical toys that played complex tunes, logic boards that required critical thinking far beyond my years, and flashcards filled with words, equations, and advanced scientific concepts that I was still struggling to understand. And then, there were the tutors, always coming and going, making sure that Emily, my younger sister, would not just meet the standard, but far exceed it. I, on the other hand, was left in the corner of our shared space, quietly playing with my old toys, the ones that had once felt like treasures. Now, they seemed insignificant in comparison to the shiny new educational devices Emily had at her disposal. I watched as she grew, perfectly capable of grasping concepts that were beyond my reach, and slowly, I began to fade into the background. Emily is already memorizing the entire periodic table at 2. Isn't that incredible? Mom would say to anyone who would listen, always with that proud, glowing smile that seemed to brighten the entire room. She was in awe of Emily's natural genius, her perfect little creation. Every milestone that Emily hit was celebrated with fanfare, with a sense of astonishment from everyone around us. But me, I couldn't even remember the last time I had been told I did something well, something that deserved recognition. It wasn't that I didn't try. Oh, I tried. I worked harder than anyone could imagine. I spent hours practicing, reading, and trying to catch up to Emily's impressive feats. But the more I tried, the further I seemed to fall behind. The more I pushed myself to do better, the more I realized that it was never enough. One afternoon, I brought home a painting I had worked on for weeks. It was a piece I was really proud of. Bright colors, bold lines, an abstract representation of the sunset that had been on my mind for days. My hands were trembling as I showed it to Mom, hoping she would see what I saw. I had put my heart into it. But instead of offering any praise, she barely even looked at it before turning to Emily and saying, "Oh, that's nice, honey, but look at what Emily did today. She just solved a calculus problem on her own. She's brilliant." "You should really try harder, Samantha." I stood there, holding my painting, feeling the weight of her words like a blow. I tried to smile, to brush it off, but inside, something cracked. The truth was, nothing I did would ever be enough. I was always going to be compared to Emily, always going to be the shadow in the background of her accomplishments. And as much as I wished it were different, as much as I wanted to break free from the cycle of comparison, I couldn't. "Just try harder," Mom would say, always with that same indifferent tone. "You're capable of so much more than this, Samantha." But no matter how much I tried, how much effort I put into everything I did, it was never enough to earn the same praise, the same recognition that Emily received effortlessly. She had everything handed to her, the praise, the validation, the attention. I was left with the empty promise that next time would be better, that next time I would finally be enough. And so I stopped expecting. I stopped hoping for compliments. I stopped looking for that moment when Mom would smile at me the way she smiled at Emily. It never came. All I received were endless comparisons. Emily's getting into advanced math classes, or Emily just finished reading a whole novel in French. And it seemed like every time I tried to make something of myself, it was overshadowed by her success. "Oh, that's nice, honey. But Emily just created an entire computer program on her own. She's incredible." I began to withdraw, retreating into myself, telling myself that if I didn't expect anything, if I didn't care about being praised, it wouldn't hurt so much when it didn't happen. But the truth was, it hurt more than ever. Every word, every glance, every comparison left a scar, silent, invisible, but deep. I couldn't escape it. I was constantly reminded that no matter how hard I tried, I would always come second. One afternoon, when I was 10, I came home from school to find my mother excitedly telling me about Emily's progress in her science project. "Samantha," she said, "Emily just finished a project on DNA sequencing. She's going to present it to the science fair this weekend." My heart sank. I had never been asked to do anything so impressive. I had never been asked to present my work in front of anyone. But Emily, she was the shining star, and I was the forgotten child, left to play with my toys in the corner. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. Emily would always be the one they talked about. She would always be the one they cheered for, the one who received all the attention, all the love. And no matter how hard I tried to change that, it would never be me. The worst part was not the comparisons. It wasn't even the silence after I did something well, only to have it dismissed. No, the worst part was realizing that I didn't matter. I wasn't important in the way Emily was. My efforts were invisible. I was invisible. And no matter how much I wanted to change that, no matter how much I wanted to be seen, nothing was ever going to be enough. I stopped showing my artwork to Mom. I stopped telling her about my achievements, because I knew they didn't matter. They never had, and they never would. It wasn't just about the praise. It was about being seen. And I had stopped expecting to be seen long ago. Knock knock. Now you're about to watch the best part of the story. But before that, make sure to subscribe to my channel so we can keep going together. I had my own room, a small space that I loved dearly. It wasn't just a room. It was my sanctuary, a space where I could escape from the chaos of the world and be myself. It overlooked a garden, and the trees outside swayed gently in the wind, their leaves rustling like a soft lullaby. The light that filtered through the window in the morning gave everything a golden hue. It was peaceful. It was mine, no one else's. Every morning, I would wake up, stretch, and spend a few moments by the window, watching the birds flutter around, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking up. It was the one part of my day that felt truly mine. There was comfort in that, knowing I had a space in the world that was entirely for me, where I could think, dream, and just be. But when I turned 12, everything changed. Emily needed a bigger room. "She's growing up, Samantha. She needs this space more than you do," my mother said, her voice carrying an air of finality, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't a question, not even a suggestion, it was a decision. A decision that made me feel like I was already an afterthought. I didn't argue, couldn't. The weight of my mother's words hung heavily in the air, suffocating me. I knew there was no point in fighting it. There had never been any point in fighting for space in this house, in this family. I had been relegated to the shadows long ago. But my room was the last thing I had left, the last thing that made me feel like I mattered. The next day, I came home from school to find my things packed up. My heart sank when I stepped through the door and saw the remnants of my childhood scattered around the living room, tossed into cardboard boxes. My childhood room, the only place I could ever call my own, was now empty, stripped of everything that made it mine. The walls, once adorned with my drawings, were now bare, and all the little trinkets I'd collected over the years were tucked away in boxes, hidden out of sight. In their place were Emily's study materials, piles of neatly stacked books, awards she had won over the years, and posters of famous scientists. Her role models, the people who inspired her, felt like a slap in the face. It was as if my room had never been mine to begin with, and now it was being claimed by someone else. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart aching as I took it all in. The one thing that had always belonged to me, the one thing I thought I could always count on, was gone. My room, the only space where I had ever felt seen, felt safe, was now Emily's. It wasn't just the physical space I had lost. It was the last piece of my identity in this house. The last place where I could be me without comparison, without judgment. I walked slowly toward the small, cramped room next to the laundry room. The room they had decided to give me. It was smaller, colder, and more uncomfortable than anything I'd ever experienced. The air in the room felt thick, heavy. It was a stark contrast to the sanctuary I had once called my own. The walls were pale and uninviting. The small window barely let in any light, and the bed was so close to the wall that it felt like I was suffocating in the space. There was no window with a view of the trees, no soft morning light filtering through the blinds. This was no longer a room. It was a cage. I stood in the middle of the room, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The silence around me felt deafening. The weight of the moment was too much to bear. My childhood had been erased, and there was nothing I could do about it. I tried to gather my thoughts, but they scattered like broken glass. What was I supposed to feel? Anger? Hurt? Sadness? Maybe all of them, but above all I felt invisible. I was no longer the firstborn, the child who had once been the center of my parents' attention. I wasn't the one they were proud of anymore. Emily had taken that role. She had stepped into the spotlight, and I had been pushed aside. No longer seen, no longer celebrated. My family wasn't interested in anything I had to offer. It wasn't just the room that had been taken from me. It was the very essence of who I was in this house. I wasn't important. I wasn't special. I wasn't enough. I was just a shadow, an afterthought. Emily's achievements were the ones that mattered. Emily's dreams were the ones they held on to. As I lay in that small room that night, the reality of it all sank in. The room felt colder than it ever had before. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see my childhood room. The room that had once been my sanctuary, now taken over by Emily. I felt trapped, suffocated by the walls of the room and by the weight of my own thoughts. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand why I had been shoved aside. But I knew it would do no good. My mother had made her choice. Emily had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who was destined for greatness. And I was just there. The next few days felt like a blur. I went through the motions, going to school, coming home, retreating to my new room. But inside I was empty. I wasn't just physically distant from the family now. I was emotionally distant, too. The person I had once been, the girl who had dreams, who had potential, was fading away, lost in the quiet of that small, cold room. And the worst part? No one noticed. No one cared. Emily was busy with her next big achievement. My parents were preoccupied with her future. And I was left in the shadows, trying to pick up the pieces of a life I didn't even recognize anymore. I graduated high school and left home, hoping that maybe the world outside would be kinder. For the first time, I felt a sense of freedom, like I could finally escape the suffocating expectations that had plagued me for years. It was a strange mixture of relief and excitement. I wasn't sure if I was running away from my family or running towards something better, but I was going, and that was enough. I got a full scholarship to a prestigious university, the kind of school I'd always dreamed of attending, but that had always seemed out of reach. It was a place where I could prove to myself that I could achieve something without my family's approval, without the constant comparison to Emily. There, I was just another student, just another person working to make something of themselves. For the first time, I didn't have to be Emily's older sister or the quiet, overlooked one. I could just be Samantha, and that was something I hadn't experienced before. I worked hard. I poured everything into my studies, took on internships, and built connections. I had no safety net, no parents, no family who checked in on me. But I didn't need that anymore. I was doing it for myself. I was carving my own path, and it felt good. I felt alive in a way I never had before. But then the holidays came and I had to return home. My parents had invited me back to the house, and though part of me dreaded it, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would be different. Maybe now that I had accomplished something, maybe they would see me. Maybe I could finally be enough. When I walked through the door, though, I immediately felt that something was wrong. The house was filled with an energy that didn't belong to me. There were decorations everywhere, and the smell of expensive food and wine wafted through the air. There was a large guest list, more people than I had expected to see at a family gathering. My parents were busy, not with me, but with the preparations. It wasn't my success they were celebrating. It was Emily's. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart sinking. Emily had just signed a deal with a major tech company, a company my parents had been raving about for weeks. Her name was all over the place. Posters with her smiling face were plastered on the walls, advertisements for her new role flashing across the screens in the living room. She had become the center of attention, and I was nothing more than an extra in my own family's story. I wasn't mad at Emily. She had worked hard for her success. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach as I realized that once again, I had been pushed aside. This party was supposed to be about me. It was supposed to be a celebration of my accomplishments. I had worked so hard to get where I was, not only as a student but as a person who had fought for her own recognition. I had paid for the event. I had arranged the catering. I thought this was going to be my moment, my chance to shine in front of my family and finally feel seen. But instead, it had all been hijacked by Emily's achievements. My parents, who had always been so quick to praise Emily for every little thing she did, were now publicly showering her with praise once again. My name was nowhere to be found in the decor, in the speeches, in the smiles that everyone had for Emily. I was invisible. I had spent my whole life being overshadowed, but this was the breaking point. This wasn't just about a party. This was about years of feeling small, years of feeling like I wasn't enough. All the sacrifices I had made, all the nights I had stayed up studying, trying to prove myself, seemed like they meant nothing in this moment. As I walked into the main room, I noticed how every corner of the space was designed to highlight Emily's success. There were banners with her name on them, guests chatting excitedly about her latest tech deal. Everyone was buzzing about her, and I was left standing in the background, feeling more and more invisible. I could feel the anger welling up inside me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to stay quiet. I wasn't going to let this moment pass without saying something. I wasn't going to let them ignore me anymore. I walked to the center of the room, my hands trembling slightly as I held my glass. The room grew quieter, and everyone's eyes turned to me. The familiar anxiety crept up my chest, but I didn't let it take over. This was my time to speak, and I was going to do it. "Excuse me, everyone," I began, my voice shaking but steady, loud enough to be heard by everyone in the room. I just wanted to say a few words. The room fell into a stillness that felt almost unnatural. My parents' eyes locked with mine, their faces frozen in a mix of surprise and discomfort. I could feel their judgment already beginning to form, but I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. I'm Samantha Harlow, and I've worked incredibly hard to get where I am today. This party, this celebration was supposed to be about me. But instead, It's become another moment for my family to celebrate Emily's achievements. I could feel the heat rising in my face, but I pushed forward. There was no turning back now. This was my truth, and it needed to be heard. I'm not against her success, I continued, my voice growing more firm. I am proud of what she's done, but what I won't accept is being erased from my own achievements. I've spent years trying to make my family proud, trying to earn a place in this family, but it's never enough. I've worked hard to get to where I am, and yet, once again, I'm pushed aside in favor of someone else. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see Emily standing there, frozen, her mouth slightly open in shock. She hadn't expected this. None of them had. But I couldn't worry about that anymore. This moment wasn't about her. It wasn't about my parents, either. It was about me, finally standing up for myself, finally acknowledging my worth even if no one else would. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every word I'd just spoken. This was supposed to be my celebration, I finished, and I won't let anyone take that away from me. For a moment, no one said anything. My parents exchanged a look, their faces a mix of guilt and anger, but I didn't care. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let them diminish it any longer. I set my glass down with a steady hand, my heart racing in my chest. But for the first time in my life, I felt proud of myself. I had said what needed to be said. I had finally found my voice. The days following that moment were some of the hardest of my life. My parents cut me off completely. They no longer reached out to check on me, and any attempt at reconnecting with Emily was met with coldness. But in a way, I didn't need them anymore. I had built a life for myself. I worked at a top financial firm, and when I was just 30, I was appointed CEO. I had done it on my own, without their support, and for the first time, I felt at peace. At my first company announcement, I remembered my grandparents, the only family members who had ever believed in me. I called them right after the announcement, my voice shaking with emotion. I did it, I whispered into the phone. They didn't say much, but I could hear the pride in their voices. You've always been worthy, Samantha. From day one, I had left my parents' house years ago, but now I could leave with my head held high. I had built my own success, and for once I didn't need anyone else's validation. Reflection and final thoughts. Looking back, I realized that my story isn't just about a broken family or unacknowledged success. It's about finding your own voice and standing up for yourself. It's about not letting anyone, family, friends, or society, tell you what you are worth. I didn't let their favoritism define me, and I never will. My journey wasn't easy, but it was mine, and I'll never apologize for it. Now that you've heard my story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you feel about the journey I've been through? Do you agree with my decisions? Or do you see things differently? Feel free to share your reflections in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's so much more to come. I can't wait to bring you the next chapter of this journey. Thank you for listening and for being a part of this experience. See you next time.